The text arrived, a cold, digital shard cutting through the vibrant hum of the afternoon at my boutique. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha. My hands didn't shake as I read it, though a phantom tremor seemed to ripple through the air around me. My voice didn't waver as I continued to help Mrs. Peterson pick out a silk scarf, discussing the merits of emerald green versus sapphire blue with a detached professionalism that even surprised myself. The only outward sign that my husband of 12 years had just nuked our marriage via casual text message, complete with a derisive laugh, was a slight, almost imperceptible tightening around my eyes, a muscle memory of pain, perhaps, but quickly overridden by an instinct for control. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase carefully wrapped in our signature silver paper. The delicate rustle of tissue a stark contrast to the earthquake that had just occurred in my personal life before I allowed myself to type my response. Good luck. That was it. My name is Claire, and at 38, I just received the most callous, cowardly goodbye in the annals of relationship history. But while Mark was probably somewhere gloating over his grand, dramatic exit, undoubtedly imagining me collapsing in a heap of tears over his betrayal, I was calmly, methodically locking up my boutique for the day, the gentle click of the lock a counterpoint to the quiet storm brewing within. The signs had been there for months, subtle at first, then increasingly blatant, like a poorly written script unfolding before my eyes. The late nights at work that never quite matched his pay deposits. A discrepancy I'd quietly noted, referencing his office hours with the digital trails of his time cards. The sudden, inexplicable password changes on his phone, which he'd clumsily try to hide or invent excuses for. As if I wouldn't notice the new, guarded way he clutched the device. The almost religious fervor with which he'd started going to the gym, not for health, but for vanity, his new, overly tight gym clothes an obvious attempt to recapture a youth that was rapidly slipping away. He'd swapped his sensible work attire for trendy, designer jeans, even trying to adopt slang he clearly didn't understand, making him sound like a desperate caricature of a man half his age. 3 months ago, my quiet suspicions had solidified into undeniable facts. I'd found a crumpled receipt for an extravagant dinner, for 2 at a prohibitively expensive downtown restaurant, tucked into the pocket of a blazer he'd left on the laundry pile. The date on the receipt perfectly coincided with a night he'd claimed to be working late on a critical project. That same evening, without a word to him, I'd opened a separate, entirely new bank account at a different financial institution, miles away from our usual branch, an instinctive move born of self-preservation. A week later, when he'd casually mentioned wanting to combine our accounts to simplify things. A vague, ill-defined notion that he spun as a step towards greater financial unity, I'd agreed cheerfully. A serene smile plastered on my face, while simultaneously transferring the bulk of my personal savings, accumulated over years of diligent work and frugal living, to the newly established, secure account. The joint account he'd just emptied. It contained exactly enough to keep him from getting suspicious, a carefully calculated 2 months' worth of our regular, combined deposits, a mere illusion of shared wealth. The substantial rest, my true financial security, was safely tucked away, along with meticulously detailed records of every suspicious transaction he'd made over the past year: luxury hotel stays, high-end restaurant bills, expensive gifts, all the digital breadcrumbs of his escalating infidelity. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against the polished wood of the sales counter. Another message from Mark. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Melissa. The name solidified the image of the new receptionist at his office, a young woman barely out of college, who exuded an air of wide-eyed naivete. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, Watched her laugh too loudly at Mark's tired jokes. Noticed the way she'd instinctively touched his arm. When she thought no one was looking, a possessive little gesture. She was young enough to be his daughter. Definitely naive enough to genuinely think she was special, the one woman who truly understood him. I didn't respond to his text. There was no point. Instead, with a calm born of quiet resolve, I called my lawyer the sharp, no nonsense attorney I'd consulted 2 months ago, when I'd first found those damning hotel charges on our credit card statement. It's time, I said simply, my voice steady, betraying no emotion. He just made his move. A moment of silence, then her crisp, professional voice replied, "The papers are ready, Claire. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Miami?" I paused, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. No rush, I mused. Let him think he's won first. Let him bask in his delusion of triumph. Another text from Mark, imbued with a patronizing tone that grated on my nerves. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." My little shop. The successful boutique I'd built from scratch, brick by painstaking brick, over a decade of dedication and hard work. The one that generated more than double the income of his stagnant, middle management position. The one whose substantial profits I'd meticulously kept separate from our joint finances, despite his occasional grumbling about my obsessive bookkeeping. I smiled, a genuine, mirthless smile, thinking of the certified letters that would soon greet him in Miami, hand-delivered by a process server. Let him enjoy his moment of perceived triumph. Let him relish the brief illusion of freedom. I spent that evening in our house, or more accurately, my house, since I'd inherited it from my grandmother years ago, and through sheer force of will and a lucky instinct, had kept it solely in my name, despite Mark's repeated, nagging suggestions to add him to the deed to simplify things. Another fortunate foresight that had paid off handsomely. While meticulously organizing the voluminous paperwork my lawyer would need, bank statements, business records, property deeds, I stumbled upon our wedding album. Mark looked so different then, younger, less burdened, before his midlife crisis had turned him into this pathetic caricature of his former self. These days, he wore shirts too tight for his softening middle, tried too hard to connect with the 20-somethings at his office, and used slang that sounded utterly ridiculous coming from a man of 45. My phone kept buzzing with texts from him, each one more condescending, more self-aggrandizing than the last. "I've been planning this for months. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your own age. Already told my family. They agree we grew apart. It's nobody's fault, really." I calmly screenshotted each message, carefully adding them to my growing evidence folder. Let him dig his hole deeper. My lawyer would absolutely revel in his casual admission of premeditation, his gleeful announcement about emptying our account. The last text, however, truly caught my attention, a flash of pure idiocy on his part. "BTW, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift, lel. Perfect." With a surge of quiet satisfaction, I immediately called the credit card company. "Mrs. Harrison speaking." I began, my voice clear and authoritative. "I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately." The representative on the other end, though professional, couldn't quite hide a flicker of intrigue. "Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges?" "Yes," I stated, a calm precision in my voice. "Two first-class tickets to Miami booked today, hotel charges at the Royal Palm, and I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user, effective immediately. Do you have documentation of the fraud, ma'am?" she asked, her tone now tinged with undeniable curiosity. "Absolutely," I replied. Text messages from my husband admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our bank account. "I'll be happy to forward them. to your fraud department right now." The representative's professional tone couldn't quite hide her distinct satisfaction as she swiftly confirmed the cancellation of the charges and the removal of Mark's access. Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport tomorrow, filled with the self-congratulatory glow of their escape, only to find their tickets invalidated, their lavish hotel reservation at the Royal Palm canceled. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mark, oblivious to the storm I had just unleashed. "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller." I actually laughed out loud at that one, a genuine, robust laugh that startled the quiet evening air. Did he truly, in his boundless arrogance, think he had any claim to my grandmother's house? Had his ego grown so grotesquely large that he'd forgotten whose name was indelibly etched on the deed? Another buzz. "And I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your half, my half, of my business. The business I'd meticulously built myself, funded myself, grown myself from a tiny seed into a thriving enterprise, all while he complained about my long hours and dismissively called it my little hobby." I poured a generous glass of wine, the good stuff, the vintage I'd been saving for a truly special occasion. This, without a doubt, qualified. Tomorrow, Mark would learn some hard, undeniable truths about property law, separate assets, and the consequences of underestimating a woman who paid attention. But tonight, I would enjoy the quiet solitude and begin to calmly, methodically, plan my next triumphant chapter. Morning brought a flurry of increasingly angry, almost frantic texts from Mark. "What the heck did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets! The hotel canceled our reservation!" Answer me. I silenced my phone with a contented sigh and headed to my boutique. Friday was always our busiest day, and I had a new shipment of exquisite designer handbags to unpack and display. "Life as it turned out," went on, "even when your husband ran off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter." Around noon, his mother called, her voice tinged with a familiar blend of concern and judgment. "Claire, dear, Mark told us everything about how controlling you've been, how you drove him away. He says you're being vindictive now, causing problems with his travel plans." I put her on speaker while I meticulously arranged a window display, carefully positioning a display mannequin. Did he mention emptying our joint account and then fraudulently charging tickets for him and his girlfriend on our credit card, Barbara? Silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then a hesitant, "Well, he said you left him no choice, that you'd been cold and distant." I picked up a delicate silk scarf, smoothing it over the mannequin's neck. "Barbara, I have his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money. Or perhaps the one where he mocked my age, implying I was over the hill." Another pause, longer this time. Then a softer tone. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that text message was entirely inappropriate. "I appreciate the call, Barbara," I said, a note of finality in my voice. "I've always liked you. But I think it's best if we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Mark's family during the proceedings." "Proceedings?" she gasped, her voice sharp with surprise. "Already? Goodbye, Barbara." I disconnected the call, feeling a wave of detached serenity wash over me. By late afternoon, the family gossip network was in full swing. Mark's sister, Amanda, was spreading the latest through mutual friends. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were stranded, stuck at a budget motel near the airport, their Miami dreams temporarily derailed. He'd tried using his personal credit cards, but those had been maxed out for months, another glaring red flag I'd noticed, cataloged, and accounted for. My lawyer called with an update, her voice carrying a note of controlled triumph. "The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday, Claire. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a very strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? I inquired. Not yet. She chuckled lightly. But he'll get the papers at his new motel address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some rather choice comments about you. I smiled, thinking of my own meticulously organized documentation, a year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, and those increasingly incriminating text messages that proved premeditation. Mark had been so utterly focused on his grand, dramatic escape that he'd never once considered I might be watching, waiting, quietly, preparing for this very moment. My phone buzzed with another text, his frustration clearly boiling over. You think you're so smart. But I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer immediately, adding it to the rapidly growing file of Mark's spectacular mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about separate assets and the true nature of business ownership. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about retribution. It's simply about being prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday was everything I could have hoped for, a carefully choreographed reveal of his folly. Mark showed up in his new, carefully curated young wardrobe designer, jeans too tight for his age, a blazer that screamed midlife crisis, an air of forced bravado. Melissa waited outside, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh, unforgiving courthouse lighting. My lawyer, poised and professional, presented our evidence methodically, each piece a precise blow. Mark's gleeful text about emptying OR account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of hidden expenses, each incriminating detail carefully collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Mark's hastily hired, visibly flustered lawyer attempted. My client admits to some rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been vindictive and calculating? Calculating. My lawyer countered, her voice sharp and precise. You mean prudent. My client protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, counselor. That's smart business. The judge, a stern-faced woman with an air of no-nonsense authority, reviewed my documentation. The separate property deed to the house, the boutique's incorporation papers, unequivocally in my name only, the careful, undeniable separation of business and personal finances that Mark had always complained about, calling it untrusting. Miss Steppert, Harrison, the judge addressed Mark directly, her gaze piercing. You admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a flicker of panic in his eyes. I was just trying to make a clean break, Your Honor, by committing financial fraud. The judge raised an eyebrow, her tone cutting. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation shows is clearly separate from marital assets. The business grew during our marriage. Mark's lawyer tried again. Desperate. My client is entitled to. The business was established before the marriage. Your Honor. My lawyer interrupted, her voice firm. And Mrs. Harrison maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. I have documentation of every penny invested and earned, independently of Mr. Harrison. I watched Mark's face as the crushing weight of reality began to sink in. He had genuinely thought this would be easy. Empty our accounts, run off with his young girlfriend, maybe claim half my business in the divorce as a little bonus. He'd never bothered to understand my insistence on keeping things separate. Had mocked my careful bookkeeping as obsessive and unnecessary. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct. The judge announced, her gavel tapping lightly. Al's shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone! Mark protested, his voice cracking. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, Mr. Harrison. The judge cut him off, her voice devoid of sympathy. And Mr. Harrison, the court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund adventures with paramours. As we walked out of the courthouse, I heard Melissa, still waiting outside, anxiously asking Mark about their Miami plans. His desperate, whispered response was lost in the confident, rhythmic sound of my heels clicking across the marble floor. Heading back to the business he'd never truly understood, respected, or, indeed, owned. The next few weeks brought a string of increasingly desperate, and frankly, pathetic moves from Mark. He tried claiming the boutique had actually been his idea, a sudden burst of entrepreneurial genius he'd apparently kept secret for years. He remembered investing significant money in its early days, even suggesting he'd been my silent business partner, all along claims quickly disproven by my meticulous records and his complete lack of understanding of the business's operations. Hayes getting desperate. My lawyer observed during our weekly call, a hint of amusement in her voice. His girlfriend's social media shows they're staying at her studio apartment now. Apparently, living on a receptionist's salary isn't quite the glamorous escape he imagined. Mark's family, who had initially rallied behind him with such misguided loyalty, started reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. We had no idea, Claire, his sister Amanda admitted during an unexpected visit to the boutique. She looked genuinely contrite. He told us you'd been cold, controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw his texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called again, this time her voice thick with tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. I thought I did anyway. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support, if it had been genuine, might have meant something weeks ago. But now it felt like rats scrambling to desert a sinking ship. The boutique ironically thrived. Local gossip about my situation, far from being detrimental, seemed to boost sales. Women started coming in specifically to show support, often leaving with far more than they'd planned to buy. My ex tried something similar. One customer confided while buying a designer handbag, a knowing smile on her face. Thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Mark, his tone swinging wildly between seething anger and clumsy manipulation. You've ruined everything? I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding, letting him dig his hole deeper with every self-incriminating word. Through the grapevine, I heard Melissa was having serious second thoughts, apparently, sharing her cramped studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford his own place. Wasn't quite the romantic adventure she'd imagined. The age gap that had seemed exciting during their clandestine hotel meetings felt different in the harsh light of reality. She posted about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes yesterday. My lawyer mentioned during an update call, a dry amusement in her voice, and removed her relationship status this morning. Her social media is a goldmine for us, by the way. I almost felt sorry for Mark, almost. But then I remembered his casual triumphant, after telling me he'd emptied our account, the callous cruelty of his comments about my age, the way he'd simply assumed I'd be helpless and broken without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else, something far more potent, pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he so spectacularly underestimated me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture from Mark's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Melissa was noticeably absent, having, according to office gossip, moved on to a coworker her own age. Mark had shown up in his old, ill-fitting clothes. The designer wardrobe apparently returned to help repay the joint account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my ironclad. Documented separation of assets. Your Honor. Mark's lawyer attempted one last time, a desperate plea in his voice. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support and moral support. My lawyer interrupted, her voice laced with incredulity. Like these text messages belittling Mrs. Harrison's business as a little shop, or these social media posts calling it her hobby. The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful, strategic planning. I kept my house, my thriving business, and all my separate assets pristine and protected. Mark got his personal possessions, his car, which was worth less than he owed on it, and a valuable lesson in financial prudence. "You've destroyed me," he hissed, his face contorted with rage as we left the courthouse, the very picture of a broken man. "I'll have to move back in with my parents." "No, Mark," I replied calmly, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother was waiting outside, her face a mixture of resignation and embarrassment, ready to drive him to her house, his new home at 45. The bitter irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd mocked my age was now living in his childhood bedroom, while I continued to run my incredibly successful business. "You planned this all along," he accused, his voice rising in impotent fury. "You knew this would happen." "No, Mark," I corrected him, meeting his gaze directly. "I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." His mother stepped between us, putting an end to the public spectacle. "That's enough, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." As they walked away, a defeated pair, I heard her begin her quiet lecture. "Honestly, what were you thinking? A 20-year-old, emptying bank accounts, sending those horrible texts." I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling nothing but profound relief. Mark had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that cruel text. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid plans in motion. My phone buzzed, not with texts from Mark this time, but with notifications of new orders from my boutique's thriving website. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he'd imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique had not only weathered the storm, but expanded to a second, larger location in a prime commercial district. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Mark struggled to rebuild his shattered life from his childhood bedroom, the little shop he dismissed was flourishing beyond anything he could have conceived. I'd hired 3 new full-time employees, bringing my total staff to nearly a dozen, and launched an online store that was rapidly gaining traction nationally, attracting customers from across the country. News of Mark's continued struggles trickled back through mutual acquaintances, painting a picture of a man increasingly isolated and despondent. He'd tried dating apps, but women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his history through the robust office gossip network, steered clear. Melissa, it turned out, had become a cautionary tale herself, apparently warning her friends about him, even sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she'd finally left him. His career suffered too. The company's HR department had launched a discreet but thorough investigation into his inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand that effectively blacklisted him from future promotions. The promotion he'd been expecting, the one that had supposedly fueled his arrogance, went to someone else, someone who didn't have a history of questionable ethics or inappropriate relationships with reception staff. He tried to claim age discrimination. Amanda told me during an unexpected, apologetic visit to the boutique, said they were punishing him for dating someone younger. Char just added that complaint to his file, apparently. It was a joke, honestly. I was surprised, but not displeased, to see his sister in my store, her presence speaking volumes about how thoroughly Mark had alienated his own family. I know we didn't support you at first, Claire, she admitted, running her fingers over a luxurious silk scarf, a product of my expanded inventory. He played the victim so well, and we fell for it. But watching how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, how he refused to take responsibility, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me updated on Mark's continued, futile attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied. His claims of unfair distribution dismissed summarily based on the irrefutable evidence of his own actions. Hay actually tried arguing that his text about emptying the account was just a joke. She told me, laughing openly. The judge asked if Ha made theft less illegal. It was glorious. The boutique's burgeoning success brought an unexpected, profound validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy, resilient businesswoman who had brilliantly protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs, particularly women, frequently asked for advice about keeping business and personal finances separate. The best protection is preparation. I told one bright young woman who, ironically, reminded me a little of Melissa, and always trust your instincts. They're usually right. Mark's mother called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive or financially ruinous. He'd tried online gambling, hoping for a quick fix to his mounting financial problems. He'd gotten involved with a dubious pyramid scheme that promised fast, impossible returns. Each desperate attempt to recover his former lifestyle just dug him deeper into trouble, accumulating more debt and disillusionment. I don't know where we went wrong with him, Claire. She sighed during one call, her voice heavy with wariness. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet, if he'd just take responsibility for his actions. But he's still blaming everyone else. You, Melissa, his company, the judge. Everyone but himself. I listened politely, offering a few non-committal words, but maintained my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My life had moved forward, filled with exciting plans, for a third boutique location in a neighboring city, and a possible expansion into luxury accessories, a new line of high-end jewelry and custom pieces. The only reminder of Mark's fleeting impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging inconspicuously in my office, his final text before I finally, irrevocably blocked his number. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Below it sat my latest business award, a gleaming testament to my success, a silent, eloquent proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique location, a meticulously designed space that radiated modern elegance. The event attracted local media, and, to my quiet satisfaction, the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage or a bitter divorce. It was about a successful businesswoman, a symbol of resilience, expanding her thriving brand. Mark's betrayal had become a mere footnote, a distant prologue in my accelerating success story. During the bustling event, Melissa unexpectedly walked in, looking a little older, perhaps a little wiser. She looked younger than ever to me, or maybe I just felt that much stronger, that much more secure in my own skin. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield, her eyes darting around the elegant space. I owe you an apology. Claire, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper against the background hum of conversation. I believed everything he told me about you, how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his dreams. Then I watched him try the exact same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough. I continued arranging a display of exquisitely crafted designer sunglasses, my movements fluid and unhurried. Things weren't his dreams, Melissa. I replied, my voice gentle but firm. They were escapes. There's a profound difference. I know that now, she admitted, her gaze fixed on the gleaming display. She paused, then added, a hint of wry humor in her tone. He tried to move in when you froze the accounts. Thought my studio apartment would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I understood exactly what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes. I actually laughed at that. A genuine, warm laugh. Let me guess. I offered. He had big plans but absolutely no way to fund them. Exactly, she exclaimed, a shared understanding passing between us. Everything was always going to work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value. She shook her head, a world-weary sigh escaping her lips. I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real together. After she left, my assistant manager, a bright young woman named Chloe, whispered, was that the girlfriend? No, I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. That was just another woman who learned the same valuable lesson I did. Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a young couple examining our new line of designer handbags. Let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line. I think it has real potential. The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the quiet power of preparation and foresight. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the paramount importance of protecting their assets and trusting their instincts. Mark's mother called one last time, not to discuss Mark, but to thank me. You taught our family an important lesson, Claire, she said, her voice surprisingly firm, about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty. Mark's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems. But we're not defending him anymore. We're telling him to take responsibility. That's your legacy to our family, Claire, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. I thought about that profound legacy as I reviewed plans for a prospective fourth location, my vision expanding far beyond what it had been. Mark had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and brazenly take half of everything I'd painstakingly built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more self-reliant, and infinitely more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Mark filed another petition to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I smiled, thinking of him in his childhood bedroom, still trying, in vain, to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he so thoroughly underestimated me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting undeniably, spectacularly better. 2 years after Mark's cruel, defining Texian nose, I received an invitation to speak as the keynote address at a prestigious women's business conference. The topic wasn't divorce or betrayal. It was about building and protecting a successful, sustainable business. My personal story had evolved from a cautionary tale to an inspiring narrative of resilience and empowerment. During the Q&A session, a woman, her face etched with a familiar worry, asked about keeping business and personal finances separate from her husband's. My husband says I'm being paranoid, she confided, her voice trembling slightly. That marriage means sharing everything. My ex-husband said the exact same thing. I replied, my voice clear and resonating with experience, right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. The boutique chain had grown to 5 bustling locations, each more successful than the last, attracting a loyal clientele and critical acclaim. The little shop Mark had so mockingly dismissed now employed 30 dedicated people and had been featured in several prominent national magazines. a testament to its formidable growth. Through mutual friends, I heard Mark had finally, reluctantly, moved out of his parents' house into a small, cramped apartment above a garage. He'd had to take a lower, paying job after his former company downsized, strategically eliminating his position during a major restructuring. His dating profile still optimistically listed him as young at heart, though his profile photo was clearly outdated, a faded reflection of his youth. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original boutique location, often stopping by for a new accessory or a friendly chat. She'd earned her business degree, a surprising feat, and started her own successful social media consulting company. "You inspired me, Claire," she told me once, her gaze steady and sincere, showing me how a woman can build something lasting and real instead of falling for empty promises and fleeting fantasies. I kept Mark's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain or bitterness, but as tangible proof of how far I'd come, a constant benchmark of my journey. Below it hung a beautifully designed sign that read, simply and powerfully, "Success is the best revenge," at the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique. Now transformed from a single little shop into the flagship store of a thriving business empire, I stood addressing my expanded team of employees and my incredibly loyal customers. The space hummed with energy, filled with laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. Mark's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an official invitation. Her presence was a quiet acknowledgement of the shift in their family dynamics. She waited patiently until the crowd thinned, then approached me, her designer dress one she'd bought from my store. I noticed smoothed impeccably. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said, her voice laced with a wary sadness. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had if only things had been different. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away, Claire. He threw it all away himself." I thought about that initial text message, his casual cruelty, his arrogant assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd built something stronger, more beautiful, and more enduring than before. Each new boutique location, each new success, was a silent testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. The young saleswoman I'd hired just last month, coincidentally also named Melissa, came over with a question about the sophisticated new inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the streamlined process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished store window. I saw what Mark had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older, but one getting wiser, stronger, more successful, standing tall and utterly self-sufficient. His cruel text message had been intended to be an ending, a definitive and devastating finale. Instead, it had been a powerful, liberating beginning, not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.